Welcome to another thrilling episode where we journey through time, into the kitchens of the past, busting myths and finding truths about food history. Today, we're stepping back into the richness and greatness of the Victorian era, a time of refinement, elaborate etiquette, and captivating culinary traditions. As we wander amongst the hustle and bustle of the historical kitchen, the clanging of pots and pans, and the sizzle of something exotic on the stove, we find ourselves faced with an intriguing question. It's a myth that has been passed down through generations, a culinary tale as fascinating as it is peculiar. Did Victorians, with their stylish top hats and embellished gowns, really savor the flavor of turtle soup? Was unusual dish a constant presence on their grand dining tables, or is it merely a myth? A whimsical tale concocted over Stay Tuned to find out if the aristocrats of the Victorian era really enjoyed this special dish. So, the question lingers, did Victorian aristocrats relish turtle soup? Query takes us back to the grand dining halls of the Victorian era, where opulence was the order of the day and exotic dishes graced the tables of the elite. But was turtle soup really one of them? To answer this, we delve into the rich literature and cookbooks of the time. Charles Dickens, a man known for his vivid descriptions of life and luxury in Victorian England, often wrote about grand feasts. But, interestingly, turtle soup seldom made an appearance in his works. Similarly, Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, the quintessential Victorian cookbook, does mention turtle soup, but it's not a dish that's highlighted or given prominent placement. Why is this? Well, the lies in the scarcity and cost of turtles. Turtles, especially the green sea variety used for soup, were not native to British waters. They had to import it from warmer climates, making them a scarce and expensive commodity. Imagine having to pay a small fortune for a single bowl of soup. It's no wonder then, that turtle soup was a special dish, a meal that showed off wealth and luxury, savored by only the wealthiest of the wealthy. But what about the rest of the Victorian society? Did they never taste this coveted dish? Here's where the plot thickens. Enter mock turtle soup, a common alternative to the real deal. Made from a calf's head and flavored with spices and herbs, this soup was designed to mimic the taste and texture of turtle soup. It was widely consumed by those who couldn't afford the luxury of real turtle soup, but wanted to experience a taste of the high life. So the truth is out. Turtle soup was the caviar of the Victorian era, but most dined on mock turtle soup instead. In the grand scheme of culinary history, it's a tale of dreams, changes, and a soup that was different than it seemed. Now let's tackle another Victorian food myth. Were pigeon pies a common feature on Victorian tables? Picture this. The Victorian era, a time of industrial revolution, societal change, and unique culinary traditions. Today, we're diving into the world of pigeon pies, a dish that may sound unusual to our modern palates but was quite common in Victorian households. In popular Victorian literature, from the works of Charles Dickens to Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, pigeon pies make frequent appearances. These references might lead you to believe that pigeon pies were a delicacy, even though people think it was a luxury. But let's take a closer look. Pigeons, in Victorian times, just the urban dwellers we know today. They were a vital part of the rural landscape, serving multiple purposes. From being used as messengers to providing a source of fertilizer, pigeons were an integral part of Victorian society. But perhaps their most important role was as an important food because there were a lot of them. In an era where refrigeration was yet to be invented and fresh meat was often hard to come by, pigeons provided a reliable and accessible source of protein. Their rapid breeding cycle meant that they were almost always available, making them a staple in many Victorian homes. So, pigeon pies were indeed a common feature on Victorian tables, but not for the reasons you might initially think. They weren't a luxury or a delicacy, but rather a practical solution to the challenges of food preservation and availability. But what about the taste? Well, reports from the time indicate that pigeon meat is quite tender and flavorful, similar to dark chicken meat. The pies themselves were often baked with a variety of herbs and spices, creating a rich and hearty dish that was well loved by Victorians. In conclusion, pigeon pies were more than just a quirky Victorian dish. They were a testament to the resourcefulness and adaptability of a society in the throes of rapid change. Victorian pigeon pie, a special dish made because it was needed, not because it was fancy. Our final Victorian myth for the day: did Victorians really eat rotten meat? Now that's a question that can churn a few stomachs. But to answer it, we must first dive into the ways to keep food from spoiling during that time. In the Victorian era, refrigeration was non-existent and preventing food spoilage was a tricky business. Salt, smoke, and drying were the most common techniques used to keep meat rotting. Now let's talk about high meat. No, we're not talking about a piece of steak on a skyscraper. High meat is a term that refers to meat that has been left to age, often for an extended period of time. This process can sometimes lead to the meat developing a strong smell, akin to that of certain cheeses. But did this mean the Victorians were dining on decaying meat? Well, the truth is a bit more nuanced. While some Victorians may have eaten aged meat, the practice was not widespread. In fact, the vast majority of Victorians would have been eating meat that was as fresh as possible. Concept of high meat was often misunderstood, leading many to believe that Victorians were gorging on rotten meat. However, the difference between old meat and spoiled meat are two vastly different things. Aging meat is a controlled process that is done in a specific environment to enhance the flavor of the meat, while spoiled meat is simply meat that has turned bad due to bacteria or fungi. The Victorians, like us, knew the dangers of consuming spoiled food. They had their own methods of ensuring the meat they consumed was safe, so, while there may have been a few adventurous souls who dabbled in high meat, this was far from the norm. So, there you have it. The myth of the Victorians eating rotten meat has been thoroughly debunked. Were they eating high meat? Possibly. Were they consuming rotten meat? Highly unlikely. Rotten meat? Not quite. Aged meat perhaps, but it's safe to say that not all Victorians had a liking for the strong taste. We've journeyed through the Victorian era, busting myths and finding food truths. We've dived into the depths of turtle soup, pieced the puzzle of pigeon pies, and faced the mysterious meat menace head-on. Let's take a moment to reflect on our food history journey. In heart of the Victorian era, turtle soup was not made from slow-moving, hard-shelled reptiles, but rather from the much more accessible calf's head. Our exploration led us to the surprising discovery that pigeon pie was not just a fanciful name, but a real dish, filled with squabs and a deliciously flaky crust. And as for the mysterious meat menace, we that the Victorians were not, in fact, dining on exotic meats but rather relishing in the familiar flavors of beef, pork, and mutton. These myths, though seemingly trivial, shed light on the broader narrative of food history. They tell us about the ingenuity of cooks in the past, their creativity in the face of scarcity, and their ability to create dishes that delighted the palate, despite the limited resources. The understanding of these food myths also helps us appreciate the evolution of our food culture, from the Victorian era to our current culinary landscape. Food history is not just about recipes or cooking techniques, it's about understanding the societal, cultural, and economic factors that influenced what people ate and how they prepared it. It's about appreciating the journey of food, the farm to the table, and the transformations it underwent to become the meals we enjoy today. Our exploration into Victorian food myths is a testament to the rich tapestry that is our culinary history. It's a journey filled with surprises, revelations, and most importantly, delicious food. It's a reminder that every dish, every ingredient, and every cooking method has a story to tell, a history that's worth knowing. Next time you're enjoying a meal, the interesting history that's changed the way we eat. Until our next food history journey, bon appetit!